You are listening to the Centropic Oracle, an audiobook podcast of science fiction and fantasy short stories that make you think and feel. Simon the Cold by Charity Thomaseb. I first met Simon the Cold outside the library on a night so icy it stole all the moisture from my breath. My feet crunched through the slushy mix of sand and snow. I walked with my head bowed, the air sharp against my cheeks. That was why I nearly crashed into the man bent over the garbage bin, its latticework gleaming with frost. The glow from the man's headlamp illuminated the inside of the bin like a spotlight. Not a single sliver of light was wasted. I stood for a moment, regaining my balance, my jeans stiff with cold, and watched the man pull treasures from the dark depths. He glanced up and said to me, "You'd be surprised what people throw away." When I didn't respond, he added, "Or maybe you wouldn't." I forgot about the books I had on reserve. Instead, I raced to the second-floor cafe and bought the largest coffee on the menu board, the Caffeinator. With my pockets crammed with sugar packets and little containers of half and half, I ventured back outside. My boots skidded on the ice. A drop of coffee landed on my wrist, the scent warming the stale winter air, but I hardly felt it against my skin. My heart started pounding the second I spotted the man, still at the garbage bin. Heat flashed across my cheeks. I studied the cup in my hands. What was I doing? Was this in any way sensible? Then I thought, how can I not do this? So I marched forward, boots crunching, coffee sloshing, until the man raised his head and the headlamp shined its spotlight on me. "I can't take that from you," he said. I stood in the circle of his light, clutching the coffee, completely without words to convince him. "And no tricks," he added. "You look like the tricky sort to me." Perhaps it was nerves, or the cold, or the fact I'm the least tricky person ever born, but I burst out laughing. "I'm not tricky at all," I said. "In fact, I'm pretty transparent." That you're not, girlie. That you're not." Normally, someone calling me girlie, of all things, would crawl beneath my collar and chew away at my restraint. But this man meant it, if not with kindness, then as an acknowledgement. "I see you there, young person, and what you're trying to do. I've survived without you for this long, and will continue to long after you've forgotten me." That was why I took a step forward. He'd returned to sort his treasures, leaving me in the cold and the dark. He didn't glance up. He didn't stop his sorting. His fingers twitched ever so slightly. They were pale and stiff. Items slipped from their grasp, rattling the contents of the garbage bin. I took another step forward. "Old Simon hasn't had a shower girlie for quite a while. Just take that as fair warning." Nothing, I decided, could smell worse than this stale winter air. I took one last step and set the coffee on the edge of the garbage bin. From my pockets, I pulled the sugar packets in half and half. "It's funny," I said, placing them next to the to-go cup. "You'd be surprised what some people throw away." When he didn't respond, I added, "Or maybe you wouldn't." I walked toward the parking lot and threaded through the cars until I reached my own. I didn't look back. That, I sensed, was part of the deal. So I left the lot by the back exit and drove the long way home. It was only that night, in my dreams, that I clearly saw the strange paleness of the man's skin. The color, the texture, was like wax poured over real skin, the hue still there, but hidden deep beneath the surface. In my dream, I worried about frostbite, his and mine. When I woke, the comforter was crumpled at the foot of the bed. My skin felt waxy and prickly. I ran the shower hot until steam filled the bathroom, and I had melted all the wax away. Outside was that brilliant, breakable cold. Snow cracked, ice shattered and popped. Everything painted in bright colors, white, blue, yellow, the only colors in the world, it seemed, or at least the only ones worth noticing. Maybe that was why I didn't see the delivery truck. Maybe that was why I didn't hear the horn. At the last moment, I was jerked backward by the hood of my coat, my arms flailed, and my boots skidded across the ice-slicked sidewalk. I stumbled into the alleyway behind me, tripped, and then fell into the arms of the person who'd grabbed me. It was him, the man from the library, the one in my dreams. Old Simon, he'd called himself, but I couldn't remember if that was something he'd told me or part of my dream. "You shouldn't have done that, girlie," he said now. I didn't know if he meant stepping into traffic or buying him the coffee the night before. "Old Simon's got enough to do." He heaved me to my feet with surprising strength. "Don't need to add looking after you to my list." "You don't look that old," I said. When he laughed, all I could see was a young man beneath all that wax, rich dark skin hidden beneath the layers of what looked to be oh so cold. Only his eyes weren't pale or young-looking. This was a pair of eyes that had seen their share of winters and pedestrians trampled by horses, clipped by trolley cars, and bounced off windshields. "I am old," he said. "I have much to do, and no time for rescuing you." He brushed off his jeans and tugged his camouflage jacket into place by the epaulets. "I can see that." At the entrance to the alley, he paused but didn't turn around. "You can?" "It's in your eyes. At least, most of it is." "And the rest?" "You're looking for something." "That I am, girlie." "I'm Hallie," I said, wanting to be clear on one thing, if nothing else. No more girly. Like the comet. "Return to give me some grief?" "Maybe I'm here to help." At that moment, I doubted my sanity. My pulse went thready. With a hand, I braced myself against the alley wall, my fingertips scraping icy mortar. I was a woman who lived on library books and television reruns of Doctor Who. I was young enough to still be called girly and not mind, at least not too much. I was young enough to believe that someone like Simon the Cold had a mission, and that I could help. I was young enough to simply believe. And I was young enough to believe I could be more than what I was. He hadn't moved from the alley's entrance, a good sign. He was listening, his head cocked back to catch all the telltale sounds of the alley. In front of him, cars churned up slush, boots trampled sand and salt. But Simon's attention, all on me. "We could start with another cup of coffee." I dropped my hand from the wall and walked toward the light. "That we could, girlie," he said when I reached him. "That we could." I went with the ceramic mugs, despite the side-eye from the barista. I picked up the solid black container of half and half and plunked it on the table, despite the odd looks from everyone else. Simon added cream and sugar like I thought he would. Patrons stared at me, at my cup, at the one opposite it. Their gazes flowed through Simon. "People don't see you," I said. "People generally don't see the homeless." "But this is different." "I'm still homeless, girlie." He brought the mug to his lips, paused as if reconsidering something. "Hallie." "I can see you." "That you can." "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, we drank in silence, steam from the coffee filling the air between us, warming it until Simon himself looked warmer, his skin darker, as if the steam had melted a layer of frost. "Are you sure you want to help me?" he asked. I nodded. "Good." He set his cup on the table and grabbed my hand.
Because we start now.
We dashed through the coffee shop, scooting past bags of beans and boxes of supplies. I glanced back in time to see two things reach our table. Hairy, large, and shapeless one moment, dark blue, official-looking, clean-cut the next. They flickered from one form to another, like a hologram of two images. I stumbled and fought to regain my balance. Those aren't people!
No.
Simon tugged me through the door and into the alleyway. We plunged into the shadows, the alleys behind the storefronts a labyrinth of brick walls and trash cans. Despite the cold, the stench of rotted vegetables lingered in the air. You're not people, I added. Even in the dark alley, I caught Simon's raised eyebrow.
I can't be anything other than myself.
And that self is?
In trouble if we don't keep moving.
And so we ran, Simon in the lead. He kept hold of my hand and tugged me around dumpsters and over pallets that creaked beneath our boots. We crunched plastic sacks and cardboard boxes. The air felt sharp in my lungs, and clouds of my breath misted my face. My neck, where I had wound my scarf, started to heat. Without breaking stride, I yanked at the wool. At last, we emerged at the far end of the alley. Up the block, people streamed in and out of the coffee shop. Even at this distance, I could taste the coffee in the air. I sucked in the scent, grateful for anything that didn't reek of waterlogged wood or rancid meat. What are those things? I asked.
Something that would harm us all.
But you won't let them. He dropped my hand and then turned to look at me. Outside, he was more wintry than before.
No, he said. You won't let them.
I touched my mittened fingers to my scarf in disbelief. How could I stop those things? I didn't even know what they were. But Simon simply nodded. We stood in the cold forever. At least it felt like forever. Then I noticed the world around me. People moved at a glacial pace, their breath hanging in the air. Cars inched forward, each tread squeaking the packed snow. What did you do? I asked Simon. He grinned an icy grin.
I thought we needed a breather, a little time to collect our thoughts.
You can stop time?
No one can stop time. I merely slowed it down for a bit. It won't hinder our friends from the coffee shop, though. They're too clever for that.
He took up my hand again and tugged me forward through the ice statue pedestrians. I don't understand, I said. 1 minute you don't want me around and the next I'm supposed to stop something?
Oh, girlie. Hallie, it's more complicated than that.
We continued our strange trek through frozen people and things, a dog with one paw raised, ready to shake, a split bag of groceries, cans hanging in midair, a shower of suspended grit from a snowplow.
That night at the library, he said when we'd reached the bridge that spanned the river, and in the coffee shop. You saw me. I've been waiting for the one who sees. I just didn't expect her to be so puny.
Hey! I pulled from his grip. I'm not as puny as I look. That didn't sound quite right, or at least not as right as I wanted it to sound.
I don't know why they send me the likes of you,
he continued, almost as if I wasn't even there.
You small ones who see too much and are far too fragile.
A low boom sounded behind us. It sent a jolt through me. Then it resonated with how hard my heart was beating. Simon grabbed my hands again, yanked me fully onto the sidewalk seconds before a black SUV rumbled past.
Fragile, like all humans.
My heart thudded even harder, and the scarf around my neck felt tight, like it was choking me deliberately. The world, it's
speeding up, and so should we.
We ran, again. This time I stayed silent. This time I kept pace with Simon and thought about being fragile. Maybe he was right. The neighborhood changed the farther we went, from old Victorians in the painted lady style, to respectable, if smaller, houses, to unshoveled sidewalks, cars up on blocks, and chain-link fences that looked as though someone, or something, had clawed through them. I'd never been to this part of town before. The longer we walked, our legs had given up on running miles back, the more certain I was of one thing. This part of town didn't exist. It was another of Simon's tricks. Unless it wasn't, and it was simply one of those things people didn't want to see. Not seeing. There was a lot of that in the world, more than I ever realized. "If you're not human," I said to Simon, "then what are you?" We'd moved to trudging down the center of the street, the only clear path through all the snow. The accumulation hid the sidewalk, smoothed the steps leading up to houses. All the windows were dark, and the sun was sinking, its rays and warmth obscured by the tall buildings.
"Something old," he said to the pound of our footfalls.
"Not cold?"
"Not what?"
"That's why I broke off and tried again. When I look at you, words pop into my head," I said. Out loud, this sounded nonsensical, but I pushed on with both my feet and my mouth. "I think Simon the Cold. You don't look old to me, just frost-covered." I braced for an outburst. After all, was it better to be old or cold? Either way, it wasn't much of a compliment. But Simon's laughter echoed against the buildings. For a bare second, the sun seemed to swell, glow brighter, before turning remote and winter cold.
"Oh, girlie."
He cleared his throat.
"Hallie, I am both. I am in my winter."
He raised a hand, indicating the air, the snow, the ice around us.
"This is like looking at my reflection."
"But it's not really your reflection," I said. He shook his head, a smile still lingering.
"No, it's not. Which is why I need to finish my work before spring comes."
At last we reached the city dump. The entrance booth was empty, the gate looped with chains and padlocked. Simon walked up to the fence, passed his hand over the locks. They sprang open, the chains swinging with their weight.
"We need to arm ourselves," he said.
"Here?" My gaze scanned the piles of discarded objects, tires and dishwashers, and things that glinted in the setting sun.
"You'd be surprised what people throw away."
Simon walked through the gate, his headlamp already secured. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second lamp. Hand outstretched, he offered it to me.
"Or maybe you wouldn't."
The glow of the lamp revealed treasures. And yes, I was surprised by what people threw away. In some cases, I wasn't sure it was people doing the throwing. In my hands, I held a sword in finely wrought silver. If I swung the headlamp away and peered through the dark at it, all I saw was a broom with most of its bristles missing. Simon piled odds and ends into a grocery cart, one that had no hope of plowing through all the snow, unless you viewed it by lamplight. In that case, it was a sleek sled. My fingers lighted on a garbage can lid. I knew without even using the headlamp that it would make a perfect shield, right size, right heft, its handle made for my grip. "Is this how you see the world?" I asked Simon.
"Most of the time. Even old Simon can fall back into lazy habits."
So we see what we want to see and hear what we want to hear.
And the battle rages in front of our unseeing eyes.
He nodded.
Yes, there are layers to everything. People, this world, the things you hold in your hand. Most of the time, we don't need to see these things. Most people don't either.
But now?
Now, things are bad.
He hesitated, the briefest of smiles gracing his lips.
Cold, and winter is much weaker than it appears.
And those things in the coffee shop?
If I'm ice.
They're fire?
In a manner of speaking, yes. They would burn this world, but not in the way you're thinking, not with flame and destruction. They spark infidelities, betrayals, revenge. Oh, there is far too much revenge in the world. Why humans have developed a taste for it, I can't say. It starts sweet, but turns sour. It would fill your throat and choke you.
I clutched my broomstick sword, another question occurring to me. That night at the library, when you turned your headlamp on me, what did you see? Simon was silent for a long moment. He plucked a few more items from the debris and added them to the shopping cart. Before he turned from me, he uttered one word.
Hope.
We left the gates to the city dump unlocked.
For those who might need things,
was all Simon said. The air felt warmer against my cheeks, as if, somewhere, an invisible bonfire heated the city. First one, and then another snowflake floated down. Big, fat flakes, the sort children love to catch on mittened fingers and their tongues. The night filled with snow, until I could barely see where we were going. That, I realized, didn't matter. Simon knew the way. After a while, I discovered I did too. If I shut my eyes, the route we needed to take became clear, as if a map of it was on my eyelids. We were headed back toward the city center, straight into the heart of the banking and financial district. Why there? I asked Simon.
It's where they start their destruction, burning resources. Think of the crash of 29, or of 08 for that matter.
Will they crash the world today?
If not today, then someday, or somewhere. Old Simon can't be everywhere at once.
But we're here now. I didn't say it out loud. Even so, Simon's shoulders straightened, his step quickened, and I marched alongside him. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a mission, a purpose. I could do something worthwhile.
You've always had a purpose,
he said, the words soft as the snow.
Remember that.
They met us in the street, armed with briefcases and umbrellas, dressed in pinstriped suits. One woman wore high-heeled shoes, and yet glided effortlessly through the snow. I blinked and saw her not as she appeared to everyone else, but her true form, a fiery beast that melted a path through the ice. Her cell phone was a weapon, something I only realized when Simon yanked me to the ground. A lightning bolt whizzed over our heads and sizzled against the coffee shop's brickwork. I hunkered down next to Simon, my gaze taking in the things that surrounded us. The rest of the street had cleared, the snow so heavy it had chased everyone else inside. Streetlights bathed the night in a yellow glow, and through that glow, they approached. Bankers, police officers, firefighters, all occupations you'd instinctively trust. They circled us, each braced to attack.
I'm going to count to 3,
Simon said to me, his voice calm and steady, like we were having a conversation in the coffee shop.
Then I want you to rush the one next to the fire hydrant.
The firefighter. Even in disguise, He was a good head taller than I was. He clutched a hose, which, if anyone cared to look carefully, but of course they didn't, would be utterly ridiculous in all this snow and ice. In the world viewed through my headlamp, the creature held a coil of barbed metal. The weapon was thin, flexible, curling and uncurling like a snake. The creature stood there, unmoving, the coil undulating as if it had a mind of its own. Simon grunted. "He's yours. I'll take care of the rest." "Mine? But—" "He's the one I can't fight." Simon's voice had dropped now. "That's where you come in." "Why can't you fight him?" "I can't even touch him. We're cut from the same cloth, as the expression goes, or, in this case, the same piece of the universe." "You're related?" "In a way, but then so are we, Hallie. So are we." "And that's why I can see you, and them." "She catches on quickly." This was not Simon, but the firefighter, the huge thing in front of us. "Did you also inform her of her role after today's confrontation?" "She has no role." "Only if you dispatch us, and dear brother, you are not up to the task. Not now, so far into your winter." "We shall see." The world exploded then. The firefighter shot skyward, flames and heat evaporating the snow. The air filled with steam. As a teen, I'd taken a year of karate, but I was no fighter. I didn't know how to handle a sword. And yet, my hands knew what to do. My feet knew where to take me. I dashed, not to where the firefighter had been standing, but where I knew he'd land, my sword at the ready. His coil caught the blade seconds before his feet touched the ground. I blocked the second blow with my trash can lid shield. But that barbed metal was pliant, and it wrapped itself around my blade, yanked the handle from my grip. I panted, gaze darting between where my sword clattered to the road and Simon. The others surrounded him. He remained still, passive. I prayed he had a plan. For him and me. The creature approached, barbed metal twisting this way and that, flicking toward my boots, catching strands of my scarf when I failed to lift my shield in time. I jumped back just as the coil swirled to catch me around the ankles. He advanced again and again. I leaped. Leap, tangle, leap, tangle. Our movements a dance that led us away from Simon. Keep him away from Simon. This was my only thought, even as my shield slipped from my grip and spun on the snow-slicked asphalt. Keep him away from Simon. A crack reverberated. The buildings around us shook. I spun. We both did. The firefighter lowered his weapon and stared. A blizzard engulfed the other creatures, freezing them in place. At first, the rapid disintegration left me breathless, my stomach churning. A piece here, a piece there, torn apart, scattered. The firefighter roared with so much force, I stumbled backward. And onto my sword. With my teeth, I tore the mittens from my hands and picked up my sword. My fingers ached in the cold, but I clutched the grip, crouched low, and waited. The firefighter twirled the coil, its barbs sparking in the air. In my mind, I saw its trajectory, toward the center of the fight, toward Simon. It would end him in a brilliant blaze of fire. I sprang forward, caught the coil as it extended forward, the blade of my sword clanging against the metal, shaving off the barbs. The blow sent me to the ground, sent the sword flying from my grip. The coil hung in the air, and then fragmented, tiny barbs littering the ground, stabbing the snow. The firefighter shrank. Pieces of the others broke off, scattered in the street before vanishing. "Spring," the firefighter said, his voice weak. "Spring." And then he, too, was gone. I stood alone in the empty street. No sign of creatures, no sign of Simon. Nothing to show for what had just happened. Only fat snowflakes that stuck to my cheeks, and the broomstick I held in my hands. My library books were overdue. This was what happened when you took time out to fight creatures no one else could see. The night I returned them to the library, snow still crunched beneath my boots, but the air felt soft against my face. Most everyone went without their hats and gloves. I'd left my mittens at home. I glanced at the garbage bin, half hoping Simon would be there. He wasn't, of course. I returned my books, paid my fine, and on the way out, stopped for a caffeinator, making sure to stuff my pockets with sugar and those little containers of half and half. For old time's sake, I told myself. I could never find my way back to the city dump, although I tried several times. I still had the broomstick. I hung it above my fireplace. No one ever asked me about it. I wondered if anyone could see it, and if so, how it looked to them. When I spied it from the corner of my eye, it gleamed, the handle intricately carved. I was going to balance the cup of coffee on the edge of the garbage bin, but someone stood there, head cast downward, a glow illuminating the contents inside. My heart sped up. I clutched the to-go cup so tightly some of the coffee slipped from beneath the lid. A flash of pain spread across my skin, then the cool air rushed in to heal the burn. I approached, but the man didn't glance up. "You'd be surprised what people throw away," I said. He took a step back, as if embarrassed at being caught. My heart pounded faster. Not Simon. Not Simon. Then I saw his eyes. "Simon the Cold!" "I ain't cold, girlie." "Hallie."
"That's right, the comet. Here to burn another path through my sky."
"What happened?" I asked.
"You talking about the winter? My winter?"
I nodded.
"You were there."
The question was in his eyes, if not his voice. I nodded again.
"The way it works," he said, his words slow. "I don't always remember."
And now I was cold. Simon not remember me?
But it's hard to forget a comet that blazes through the sky, especially one that saves your life.
I did that?
You did. But now I'm in my spring, and
I'm nothing?
Or everything. That's the problem with spring. It's hard to tell what might grow. You can only plant the seeds.
I held out the coffee then, both hands clutched around the cup. He shook his head.
It doesn't work that way.
How would you know? You're in your spring. His laugh made the temperature rise at least a degree, maybe more. Wet, heavy snow slipped from a branch and plopped on the ground. I still offered the cup, arms outstretched, until, at last, Simon the Worm took it from my hands. We hope you enjoyed Simon the Cold by Charity Thomaseb, read by Larissa Thompson. If you'd like to learn more about the author and narrator of this story or make a donation to them, follow the story page link in the description. If you would like to submit a story for consideration or apply to be a narrator, a link to our submission guidelines is in the description. This story is copyrighted 2020 by the Centropic Oracle.